Good morning. It's Tuesday. It is the beginning of July. Hopefully you've just had a great 4th of July weekend. Today is the first of maybe a series of lessons that follow a structure that I'm playing around with right now, where we will write about books and then write like books. So today is the write about routine I want to talk about and kind of just get into. And there's a couple of reasons behind me even doing this. Number one, I'm really got a lot going on this summer in my mind and wanting to process a lot of that. Everything from Black Lives Matter specifically to racial injustice and racism in general, to what COVID is doing to our educational system and what the fall might look like. And so there's just a lot going on in my mind, and I want a way of processing that. And one of the best ways I know of doing that is through teaching. Even though you're not here with me, I'm going to give this a go, get some practice in over the summer, if nothing else. I also wanted a way to reach people who may have come to my classes this summer had they not been canceled at the beginning of June, and also to see if we can broaden the audience and broaden the conversation out to multiple people. So today is the first of many lessons. I'm going to read from this book, Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. And it's a way of starting with something that will help us to build a little community, hopefully together, through humor. Trevor Noah's one of my favorite comedians, and also a very smart editorialist, commentator on things that are going on in our country and in our world. And in that way, hopefully, kind of to induct us into this process before we move into maybe some tougher topics. So let's create a safe space for us to be ourselves. I'm going to walk you through the process today and where things live so that you can join me in this conversation throughout the week. And so let's get started. Today, our learning is going to be about writing about a topic. So this is a write about routine. We're going to use a few repeated readings of this text and key words from the text, either explicitly from the text or ideas that come to us. Themes, main idea, that kind of thing, things that aren't explicit in the text but are implied by the text. So that our goal is to get curious about things we might want to learn more about. So that target again is I can write about a topic by using repeated readings and keywords from the text so that I can get curious about things I might want to learn more about. All right, so in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and read this excerpt that I've chosen for us from Born a Crime. And I'm going to read it through first reading just to enjoy, to laugh, to question, to get a gist of the text. You could consider one of my favorite professional readings is the series by Kylene and Bob. Notice and Note is one, reading nonfiction, disrupting thinking. You could consider, while I'm reading this first time, their first of the 3 big questions, which is, what surprises you? So here we go. There was a low brick wall running down the middle of the road in front of Bungani's house in Alex, and every day Bungani and I and our crew would go sit on the wall. I'd bring my CDs. We'd play music and practice dance moves. We hustled CDs all day and DJ'd parties at night. At night, we started getting booked for gigs in other townships and other hoods. Thanks to my computer and modem, I was getting exclusive tracks few people had access to, but that created a problem for me. Sometimes I'd play the new music at parties and people would stand around going, what is this? How do you dance to it? For example, if a DJ plays a song like Watch Me with Nene, yes, it's a catchy song, but what is a whip? What is a nene? For that song to be popular, you have to know how to do the whip and the nene. New music works at parties only if people know how to dance to it. Bungani decided we needed a dance crew to show people the steps to the songs we were playing. Because we spent our days doing nothing but listening to CDs and coming up with dance moves, our crew from the corner already knew all the songs, so they became our dancers. And hands down, the best, most beautiful, most graceful dancer in the crew was Bungani's neighbor, Hitler. Hitler was a great friend of mine. Good Lord, could that guy dance. He was mesmerizing to watch. He had a looseness and a fluidity that defied physics. Imagine a jellyfish if it could walk on land. Incredibly handsome too. Tall and lithe and muscular with beautiful smooth skin, big teeth, and a great smile. Always laughing. And all he did was dance. He'd be up in the morning blasting house music or hip hop, practicing moves the whole day. In the hood, everybody knows who the best dancer in the crew is. He's like your status symbol. When you're poor, you don't have cars or nice clothes, but the best dancer gets girls. So that's the guy you want to roll with. Hitler was our guy. There were parties with dance competitions. Kids from every neighborhood would come and bring their best dancers. We'd always bring Hitler, and he almost always won. I'm about halfway through, so I want you to think this one's maybe a little obvious. What's surprising you? Okay, keep that in mind as I keep going. Hitler, although an unusual name, is not unheard of in South Africa. Part of it has to do with the way a lot of Black people pick names. Black people choose their traditional names with great care. Those are the names that have deeply personal meanings. But from colonial times through the days of apartheid, Black people in South Africa were required to have an English or European name as well, a name that white people could pronounce, basically. So you had your English name, your traditional name, and your last name. Patricia Nombuyiselo Noah. 9 times out of 10, your European name was chosen at random, plucked from the Bible or taken from a Hollywood celebrity or a famous politician in the news. I know guys named after Mussolini and Napoleon, and of course, Hitler. Westerners are shocked and confused by that, but really it's a case of the West reaping what it has sown. The colonial powers carved up Africa, put the Black man to work, and did not properly educate him. White people don't talk to Black people, so why would Black people know what's going on in the white man's world? Because of that, many Black people in South Africa didn't really know who Hitler was. My own grandfather thought a Hitler was a kind of army tank that was helping the Germans win the war, because that's what he took from what he heard on the news. For many Black South Africans, the story of the war was that there was someone called Hitler, and he was the reason the Allies were losing the war. This Hitler was so powerful that at some point Black people had to go help white people fight against him. And if the white man has to stoop to ask the Black man for help fighting someone, that someone must be the toughest guy of all time. So if you want your dog to be tough, you name your dog Hitler. If you want your kid to be tough, you name your kid Hitler. There's a good chance you've got an uncle named Hitler. It's just a thing. At Sandringham, we were taught more about World War II than the typical Black kids in the townships were, but only in a basic way. We weren't taught to think critically about Hitler and anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. We weren't taught, for instance, that the architects of apartheid were big fans of Hitler, that the racist policies they put in place were inspired in part by the racist policies of the Third Reich. We weren't taught how to think about how Hitler related to the world we lived in. We weren't being taught to think, period. All we were taught that was in 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, and in 1941, he invaded the Soviet Union, and in 1943, he did something else. They're just facts, memorize them, write them down for the test, and forget them. There's also this to consider. The name Hitler does not offend a Black South African because Hitler is not the worst thing a Black South African can imagine. Every country thinks their history is the most important, and that's especially true in the West. But if Black South Africans could go back in time and kill one person, Cecil Rhodes would come up before Hitler. If people in the Congo could go back in time and kill one person, Belgium's King Leopold would come way before Hitler. If Native Americans could go back in time and kill one person, it would probably be Christopher Columbus or Andrew Jackson. So in Europe and America, yes, Hitler is the greatest madman in history. In Africa, he's just another strong man from the history books. In all my time hanging out with Hitler, I never once asked myself why is his name Hitler. His name is Hitler because his mom named him Hitler. All right, I'm going to stop there. Let that just breathe. If you need to, go ahead and pause the video. Jot down things that were surprising to you. That's okay to do. That reading was a little bit longer than I usually do, and so we can definitely pare it down if we were going to use this with another group of adults or with a group of older students. I'm going to go back and model for you what that second reading would look like. We're certainly not going to read the whole thing, but I want to go back the second time and read just one short section, and this time I'm going to kind of think aloud that next step of clarifying our comprehension. So the first reading is really about gist. It's really just to kind of enjoy the text as it was made to be enjoyed and written, and not to interrupt it with a lot of conversation or commentary, right? So I'm going to go back to a certain point here, this paragraph about that starts with, the name Hitler does not offend a Black South African because Hitler is not the worst thing a Black South African can imagine. And I want to stop there because
the first time I read this, I've read this text several times, but the first time I read that, I can remember that that line blew my mind. Like, how is it possible that Hitler is not the worst possible person worldwide? And then it goes on to talk about Cecil Rhodes. Sorry, I'll reread it. Every country thinks their history is the most important, and that's especially true in the West. But if Black South Africans could go back in time and kill one person, Cecil Rhodes would come up before Hitler. And when I'm reading this, I'm wondering if this Cecil Rhodes is like the same Rhodes as we would think of when we think of a Rhodes Scholar, right? A Rhodes Scholar, lots of money. I'd have to look into a little bit more detail. But Cecil Rhodes, that name sounds familiar to me, and yet I know nothing about him. That might be an area I might want to know more about. And then it talks about people in the Congo aiming their biggest madman is Belgium's King Leopold. If people in the Congo could go back in time and kill one person, Belgium's King Leopold would come way before Hitler. If Native Americans could go back in time and kill one person, it would probably be Christopher Columbus or Andrew Jackson. Now, I've heard and been part of some of the conversation that comes up around Columbus Day, around not honoring a person who discovered America, right, quote unquote, who was a party to the genocide that happened here in our country around Native American populations when the West colonized North America. But I don't know a whole lot about Andrew Jackson and his role with Native Americans. That might be another area that I could know more about. So it's interesting here. I'm trying to kind of clarify and wrap my head around this idea that there are people who are viewed to be worse in history than Hitler. It just depends on what history you know, your cultural background, perhaps, where you live and grew up in the world, and the history of that place and that time. So it's interesting to think about that. Now, if I go back and I look at that one more time, I'm going to do so to lift out keywords, right? So this could be a full third reading, or it could just be kind of a skimmer scan. So I'm going to go back over and I want to now lift a few keywords, and I'm going to do that with, let's see, keywords in this particular section would be those two names I mentioned, Cecil Rhodes and Andrew Jackson. I'm just jotting them down over here, and I'll show you where I'm going to put them here in a second. I'm going to write down Hitler is not the worst, not the worst, which is crazy to me, and yet something I'm willing to learn more about, right? So the goal of this is to really find just something, a pathway, a thread that I want to pull a little bit, right? I want to weave myself into this with some of these keywords. If I went into another section, I might pull words like apartheid might be one. Another keyword or key phrase might be taught to think, or that education as activism kind of education. Equity might be another keyword, right? This idea of being taught how to think and racial or racist policies. So I've got a list of maybe, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10, at the end of the day, maybe 7 keywords that came from this text. Some of them I've lifted right from the text, keywords or phrases. Others were the idea or the general feeling of this. Maybe add one more around something about history. I'm not sure, like I'm thinking about like history is written by the victor, right? But in this case, it's written by the rich and powerful, right? The history that we know is the history that is adopted or professed or canonized by the rich and powerful. So I'm going to write down that word canon. That was a word that I hadn't thought of before. So the reason I'm recording this, I'm going to let you know right now, the next step is to take one of these keywords and to do a quick write. Now, I had kind of pre-planned which keyword I might write about, and now I'm even thinking of something different. Just talking to this screen, talking to you about this text has generated new ideas for me. That's the whole goal. We want to stay close to the text, but now we want to choose something that has a little bit of energy and enthusiasm for writing about. So we're going to do a quick write. And I'm going to do that live here in front of you, just so that you can see how quick and easy this could be. Now, I'm going to set a timer for 1 minute, and I like using Jeff Anderson's Power Write from 10 Things Every Writer Needs to Know. His Power Write has very simple rules. write as much as you can, as fast as you can, as well as you can for 1 minute, using the word that you chose at least one time. So I'm going to choose this word, there's a couple that I could choose, which means I might do this quick write more than once, but I won't do it right now with you. But you might see at the end that there's a couple of these on the blog. So let me actually take you here for just a second. I'm going to show you what that is looking like. Here is the blog. This video mini lesson will be posted right here at the top when I'm done recording. I'm going to talk a little bit about this blue section in a minute, but right here I'm going to do that quick write, and I'm going to use my keyword. Let's see. Ooh, my Kiwi word is going to be education. I think I might also use the word canon. I'm going to just add it up here. And so for right now, I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute. I'm going to kind of think aloud as I type, which might limit how much I'm able to type. So you might see more of this on the final quick write in the end. But let's go ahead and just get started, all right? So 1 minute starts now. So I like this idea that he's talking about education is bias. Oh, I wasn't even thinking that in the first place, is biased. The history that we are taught is tangled in the history of the victorious, the rich, the powerful, right? I really am trying to keep this stream of consciousness, right? So I'm not passing judgment on any of my, and on my ideas, and I'm not going back to fix that underline. All right. Being taught how to think critically is one thing that we can do regardless of the educational canon. How to think, oh gosh, the canon reminds us, there's my timer going up, but I'm going to finish this line of thinking, reminds us that Lincoln was one of our greatest presidents. But critical thinking might show us a different picture. All right, I'm going to stop there. That actually was 1 minute and 25 seconds. And when I do this in the future, I might go ahead and set my timer for 1.5 minutes, maybe even 2 minutes, just so I can share my thoughts with you. So I'm not going to even clean this up right now, but what I'm going to show you are now the next 2 steps, okay? So I just did a quick write. A couple of things that came out that I wasn't planning on writing or thinking, I hadn't thought about, pre-planned, are this idea of educational bias, this idea of this educational canon that came out of my brainstorm of the keywords. That might be something I want to look into or look forward to. One thing I had kind of been
percolating a little bit is this idea of who do I not know well enough? I don't know Cecil Rhodes well enough. I don't know Andrew Jackson well enough. And that came to light when I was reading a text a couple of weeks ago that brought new things to light about Abraham Lincoln, a president that I thought I knew, but I'm learning more about. So those are things that kind of surfaced as I was writing, and that's the whole point of this quick write, is it should be generative of new ideas, new lines of thinking, again, new threads. Okay. On the blog while we're here, I just kind of want to preview with you what this looks like as a process. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit, and then I'll show you where all this stuff lives. So we just did together, you watched me do step 1, where I read a section again, I read it again for a 3rd time to kind of mine it for a couple of different pathways that I might choose. Step 2 was a quick write. Notice I wrote about the text and its content. It was not a commentary on how it was written or those kinds of things. That's for our next lesson. So now step 3 is to learn more about. Is there something in my quick write that I want to learn more about? Is there something in there that could launch me into greater research? So just like I was saying before, I'm learning a little bit more about Abraham Lincoln, and the idea of what I was taught in school is very different than what I'm learning about him. And so the book that I was referring to earlier is the book Stamped by Jason Reynolds, which is based on Stamped from the Beginning, which I can't remember the author's name, by a professor. And I'm sure you all have seen the book or know which one I'm talking about. But anyway, this idea that our history books don't tell the full story. And so I might go back and reread that section about Lincoln. I also might look into what history books might tell me about Cecil Rhodes and what might be the real or the whole story of that person, or even Andrew Jackson. Okay, so I'm just going to start seeking out other sources. This could be a lot of different things. It could be, I could have a conversation with a colleague of mine who knows the presidents really well. Okay, I could have I could go back to that book that I was talking about. I could go back and read that section on Stamped and see even if they mention Andrew Jackson, see if I can find kind of a cross reference here. I'm also willing to just step back from this and let it breathe. I found that once a topic is in my brain, other sources related to it kind of just appear, okay? And then before I post this publicly, I will share what I've learned. So you've seen me quick write, and I'm gonna go and do that research here after we're done. And then I'm gonna create some way of sharing that learning with you. Here it might be a paragraph, it might be a poem, it might be a bulleted list. I'm not sure yet because I don't know what it is. I'll uncover. But that's all really authentic here. So I'm going to scroll here. Here's where the video will be in this yellow space. My write about will be here in the blue. And now really, then it's your turn. Okay. When you see the blog here, those parts will be filled in. And then really it's your turn to engage in the same text, which I've linked here down below. With different keywords, different lines of thinking, different threads that you want to pull through. And then do your own research, do your own learning more about and write about. Here's the really cool thing. I have some money from this year's STAR grant that I was not able to use for my class in June. So I've got money to spend on books that I'd really like to share with you. So if you go ahead down here in the comments down below once it's posted, if you share your write about with this community that hopefully will grow and grow over time. If you share there, you'll be entered in for a chance to win Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. Every week I'm going to do something very similar. The other thing you have an opportunity to do is come back on Thursday where I'll post the companion lesson to this, which will be not a write about, but a write like, so that we can take Trevor Noah's style and use it to write about a topic that we care about and I want to share with other people. So let me stop sharing here, and I guess that's it, guys. There are a couple places in the video that I had to splice because my phone rang and you might have heard my dogs coming through. So this is all pretty rough, but I'm learning alongside you and I can't wait for you to join in the conversation. So add your write about down to the comments down below, and I look forward to seeing you and hearing from you and joining this journey with you. So take care.